Chapter 221, The incriminating evidence gone. Gufei was capable of insta-killing his foes with fast and unpredictable attacks. It was so fast that in the time youthful reflection received the notification of his men's deaths, sent out an inquiry, and received his reply. Only 2 thieves were alive of the 20-man squad. Those 4C's members that had been sent out of the PvP arena bemoaned on the mercenary channel about their senseless deaths at the hands of the vicious Gufei. With how merciless he had been to them, had youthful reflection really convinced him to defect into their group, or had he riled him up instead? This was the question brewing in everyone's mind. Youthful reflection felt very pissed when he learned of this. He no longer entertained the thought of having Gufei into his mercenary group, since it was evident that he had been tricked. It was fine for Gufei to not reciprocate his feelings, but for him to actually take advantage of his offer to pull a fast one on him. Youthful reflection regarded such people with utter contempt. He quickly did a clear account of the current situation when his anger cooled off. In terms of points, 4C's was at a disadvantage with a score of 3 against 21. 4C's only had 5 archers and 4 thieves, while Young Master's elite had a mage, an archer, and a thief. In terms of speed, the remaining 9 members of 4C's were not at a disadvantage. The players youthful reflection had picked for the ambush team were the faster members among the 30 players, and those 2 thieves that had successfully escaped from the 3 enemy players before were not any slower. Grand kiting strategy? Youthful reflection was not afraid of that. When it came to movement speed, the 9 of them would not struggle to pit themselves against the 3 enemies. What he was really afraid of was clashing with the 3 enemies head-on. After all, they were now aware of Royal God Call's high attack power, Gufei's merciless slaying capability, and Sword Demon's excellent diversionary tactics and team play. Just how should we deal with them? Youthful reflection pondered on this as he looked at the 8 players before him. On Gufei, Royal God Call, and Sword Demon's end, the 3 were mainly eating food to recover HP and mana as they consolidated the matter of killing 18 men together. No matter how skilled a player was, participating in that sort of skirmish without getting injured was impossible. When there was no alternative left, taking some damage in exchange for the enemy's lives was already a reflection of a player's exceptional judgment. And yet, Gufei did not even drop a bit of his HP in that fight moments ago, which rendered Sword Demon and Royal God Call in awe. There are still 9 players left on their side. The 3 took the time that they were eating bread and fruit to discuss their next PvP step. Youthful reflection has yet to make an appearance. Royal God Call suddenly remarked. How strong is he? Sword Demon asked. I haven't seen him in action, but he's someone with many wacky ideas, so he's probably the sort that speaks more than he acts. Royal God Call replied. It's just 9 players. Let's just surround them once more and be done with it, Gufei suggested. Sword Demon and Royal God Call nodded their heads in agreement. Since they did not know that young Master Han's machination was what had allowed them to easily eliminate those 18 men in one go earlier, it was only natural for the 3 to think that taking down the last 9 players would be a simple task. Royal God Call even thought that he could kill them all by himself upon realizing that the opposing team no longer had a priest with them. So how's your mana, HP recovery? The 3 men asked one another, only heading out after ensuring that everyone was in top condition. High ground. These 3 decided to find the enemy's location first. A hillock was not too far from them, and as the 3 proceeded toward it, they caught sight of human activity from atop the hill. Obviously, this meant that there were already people occupying the hillock. It was no surprise for their opponents to also head over to a high ground, as they were probably searching for the 3 of them as well. The 3 exchanged looks and immediately split up to do their thing. The enemies disappeared from the hilltop, so Royal God Call sprinted over to the back of it. The long-range advantage he possessed let him launch an attack from halfway up the sloping land mass. Sword Demon and Gufei advanced to the left and right respectively, while they took note of boulders and such that could provide them cover and prevent the enemy archers from having a line of fire of them. Just as they were almost at the hillock, they heard Royal God Call curse loudly, "Fuck me." A system notification sounded following this one shout. Royal God Call was eliminated from the match. We've been tricked. Royal God Call fumed on the mercenary channel. There is an ambush ready at the back of the hillock, so be careful. You too. Alright. We'll attack from the front, then. Gufei laughed. He did not think much of Royal God Call's sacrifice. Just like how Royal God Call had thought that he could shoot all 9 men by himself, Gufei had also surmised that killing the remaining players was within his capacity. In fact, it would not matter even if Sword Demon was killed off as well. At the thought of Sword Demon, Gufei looked to the side and saw him activating his stealth. Gufei did not know where Sword Demon went after that, since the latter's attention was currently not on him. This was how a little misunderstanding occurred between them. Sword Demon thought stealth was useless on Gufei, and that the latter would be able to see his movement and match his speed accordingly. Unfortunately for him, Gufei was clueless about all this and merely continued to rush forward at his top speed. A thief's speed would be reduced significantly while on stealth, so Sword Demon had no means to catch up to Gufei at all. Unwilling to cancel stealth, he asked loudly instead, "Hey, what are you going so fast for?" By the time his shout reached Gufei's ears, the latter had already mumbled, "Translocation, blank." Just as he turned around in reaction to Sword Demon's shout, he was teleported atop the hillock. A gentle breeze rolled on the hilltop. Gufei could only roughly judge Sword Demon's position. He did not have the time to carefully search for the other as someone in front of him was already fixating his eyes on him. Youthful Reflection was staring at Gufei as if he strongly wished to ask him something. The two were no more than 5 meters apart. With a bow in his left hand, Youthful Reflection suddenly put his right hand into his dimensional pocket. "It's coming!" Gufei cried out in his mind. His blink was still on cooldown, so Gufei could only close in on the enemy with his fastest speed. Running diagonally across Youthful Reflection, Gufei kept his body low on the ground to better dodge the attack that could be coming at any time. Gufei reached Youthful Reflection's side in a few steps. Without straightening up his body, Gufei made an oblique cut from the bottom right to the top left with his sword as he yelled, "Twin Incineration!" Incinerate! Youthful Reflection, who had taken something out of his pocket, waved it at Gufei and asked, "What are you?" Gufei did not get to hear what he was about to say as his hand moved faster than a person's speech. The purple blade's fiery glow created an afterimage as it killed off Youthful Reflection, who had a surprised expression on his face. Youthful Reflection was still in that odd pose when he appeared at the square by the Hall of Mercenaries. No matter how anyone looked at it, his posture did not resemble a person who was about to attack. His right hand was held in a position where his thumb, middle finger, and forefinger were pressing against one another, yet there was nothing between them at all. "Where's the letter? Where has it gone to?" Youthful Reflection returned to his senses when he saw nothing between his fingers. He searched his dimensional pocket and looked around him, yet the letter was nowhere to be found. That was the incriminating evidence that would expose Gufei's lack of character. Youthful Reflection had already thought this whole thing through. No matter how the match went, he was not going to let go of this matter with Gufei. While it was indeed quite dishonorable of him to attempt to poach someone from another group, this was something almost every guild leader was also doing, so everyone more or less accepted it as the norm. However, Gufei's action was just too despicable. It would have been fine if he had rejected the offer. For Gufei to actually make use of it to scheme against him, Youthful Reflection believed that if the letter was made public, Gufei would no longer be seen by others as someone worthy of attracting. He only needed to give this matter a little nudge, and it would most likely tip over into a situation where Gufei would become public enemy number 1 for his vile conduct. No matter how strong he was, he would surely be unable to fight against all the guilds in Yanjuan City. Youthful Reflection was proud of himself for coming up with such a step. He took out that letter to tell Gufei of his plan and to see in person if Gufei would be remorseful of his actions or be embarrassed at being thoroughly exposed. Unexpectedly, the shameless Gufei had not even shown a hint of contrition and had actually taken that opportunity to attack him, instead. At this moment, Youthful Reflection resolved to exact revenge on Gufei, yet he could not find Thousand Miles Drunk's letter of reply, which was the key item for his revenge. Where was the letter? That letter was actually still in the PvP arena, except that it had already been burned into ash and scattered by the wind. Facing Twin Incineration that could even insta-kill players, what else could that letter turn into but a pile of ash? Gufei was feeling a little sad, 2. His fast attack execution had prevented him from getting a good look of the item youthful reflection had been waving in his hand just then. He thought that it was a weapon of sort. But why did it turn into ash? Gufei grabbed bits of the scattering ashes and inspected them. Was it a powerful magic scroll? As Gufei was thinking of this, the sound of the familiar twang of bowstrings clued him into the fact that a number of arrows had been fired off toward him. This was Youthful Reflection's original plan. While he distracted Gufei, the other archers would concentrate their firepower to assassinate the latter. None had expected for Youthful Reflection to be swiftly struck down by Gufei upon his arrival on the hilltop. However, the remaining players did not know what to do at this point, so when they saw Gufei's dazed expression, they immediately fired off arrows on homing projectile at him. Since their snipe was on cooldown after using it to dispose of Royal God Call moments ago, these archers opted to use the homing projectile skill to attack Gufei. Sadly, this skill was just too slow when used against Gufei. Extending his arm out and shaking his wrist lightly, he swatted down the 4 arrows on homing projectile heading his way. Gufei's sword did not stop there. He abruptly turned around with his sword held aloft and stabbed 4 times, revealing the 4 menacing thieves behind him. Twin Incineration's cooldown time ended just now. Gufei gauged the position of the 4 thieves and then flicked his sword out to vanquish 3 of them right there and then. The final thief lost his will to fight and turned tail. Gufei hurriedly chased after the lone thief, yet he did not rush to attack him. Those 4 archers who were watching this scene felt like crying, yet no tears would come out of their eyes. With how Gufei was sticking to the thief, even if they wanted to fire at him, their line of sight was perfectly blocked off by their fleeing comrade. Chapter 222, Silently Suffer the Loss. Again Gufei determinedly rushed down the hill as he nimbly dodged the 4 archers' hail of arrows. Seeing that Gufei was almost upon them, the archers stopped their attacks and hurriedly fled in terror instead. Since the archers had fast movement speed as well, Gufei was unable to catch up to any of them, especially when one of them would flee and the other 3 would continue to shoot arrows at him. Young Master's Elite's grand kiting strategy had one man running while all the enemies chased after him. In this case, it was Gufei who was the one being kited by the 4 archers. It was under such condition that the PvP between both sides reached an impasse. The 4 archers happily praised Youthful Reflection for eventually making the right choice. By utilizing their speed, the mage no longer posed a big threat. If they carried on fighting in this manner, the mage would most likely be the one facing death. Gufei continued to chase after the enemies, yet he could just not catch up to any of them no matter what. Eventually, the 4 archers that kept on harassing Gufei from 4 different directions slowly became complacent, completely forgetting that Gufei had the blink skill. Blink's cooldown time was 1 minute and it was already up. Gufei refrained from using it even now because he could not find a good opportunity to do so. He could only teleport himself for 5 meters, so he needed to narrow the distance between him and one of the 4 archers for his skill to work. Gufei persisted for quite some time until he finally found a chance to do it. He darted straight toward a particular archer even as the other 3 peppered him with arrows, each of them feeling dissatisfied that none of their arrows had managed to hit Gufei so far. It was common knowledge that an archer had a higher chance of hitting a moving target if he or she was closer to the person, so the 3 archers impatiently tried to narrow the distance between them and Gufei. The 3 men did not know that Gufei was keeping his attention on them, and once the latter saw an opportunity, he quickly pivoted and teleported himself before an archer. He did not have enough mana to cast Twin Incineration, so Gufei could only slash the man with his sword repeatedly. Gufei sincerely praised Fleeting Smile for his recommendation. While he would have possessed the skill to slow down his enemies if he had chosen to advance into a water mage, he would have still lacked the speed to get near them. How would his spell slow the enemies down if it could not even hit them in the first place? When it came to fighting, it was still better to improve one's skills rather than to think of ways to reduce the opponent's skills. As a kung fu practitioner, how could he have allowed himself to be tempted by that superficial benefit and ignored this basic principle he had grown up knowing? Gufei shook his head as he reflected on this. He continued to torment the archer with his sword. It was a wonder what Fleeting Smile would say if he saw this fighting scene of Gufei. With the death of the archer Gufei had targeted, the other three archers lost their elation. They finally realized that Gufei was an existence that transcended common sense, which they had no way of dealing. Gufei would teleport himself over and slay them if they were near, and he would casually evade all their ranged attacks if they were far. The three archers kept their distance from Gufei and did not think of attacking him again. The three would even flee in a hurry when Gufei moved slightly. Gufei decided to eat a piece of fruit to recover his mana, but even then, the archers merely stared at him from afar. No one knew where that other thief from before was at the moment. As he was wondering about Sword Demon's whereabouts in the map, Gufei received his message. "I'm here." Gufei could not find Sword Demon ever since the latter had activated his stealth before. The skill's duration should have ended by now. In fact, the stealth's cooldown time should also be over and Sword Demon could activate it once more. Since none of the 4C's players dared to get near Gufei, Sword Demon could only creep his way over to them. Gufei waited for Sword Demon to make his move, yet his wait was unexpectedly cut short by the system's announcement of Young Masters Elite winning this round of the Mercenary PvP tournament. The three archers and thief truly lost their desire to continue this fight, and a simple discussion on the 4C's Mercenary channel with their comrades led them to withdraw from the match. Sword Demon, who was about to launch his attack on the three archers, was left feeling disappointed by this turn of events. Shrugging his shoulders toward Gufei, he deactivated his stealth. The system quickly reported the final score for this match, and Gufei and Sword Demon were sent out of the PvP arena immediately after. Upon his reappearance to the square outside the Hall of Mercenaries, Gufei immediately felt palpable killing intent being directed toward him. He quickly looked around and saw that the 4C's members were looking at him with hate-filled eyes. All of 4C's were hatefully glaring at Gufei, ranging from the ones who had participated in the match, which included group leader Youthful Reflection, to the rest who had not participated in it. Gufei felt perplexed by this. He had fought many matches in this PvP tournament, and most of his opponents had been gracious losers and had even politely come to him to exchange a few friendly words after the matches. The only other exception was Cloud Herder mercenary group that had fallen victim to Young Masters Elite's grand kiting strategy. It was completely understandable for that mercenary group to feel dissatisfied of Gufei and his friends back then. As for 4C's, what reason did its players have to resent him more extremely than Cloud Herder? Gufei swept his gaze over and did not see young Master Han and the others. Everyone in Young Masters Elite did not have the habit of waiting for the others who were still in the match after getting killed. Waiting for the others was completely up to each of them. Those who wanted would wait, while those who did not would leave. "This doesn't look good," Gufei said to Sword Demon, who was standing beside him. Sword Demon nodded his head as he slowly disappeared right before Gufei's eyes. HP, attack power, skill cooldown, and such would all reset once players left the PvP arena. Sword Demon did not hesitate and used his stealth, as even he could sense that the situation was off. "Seriously?" Gufei sent Sword Demon this message. "Leave first, I'll help you block them from behind." Sword Demon replied, "Haha. At least, you have the mind to help. Anyway, you leave first." "Don't worry about this." Gufei did not plan to leave. He was always looking for a chance to PvP even if the opponents were difficult to deal with. After all, Gufei could not sense Sword Demon's attention, so he did not know if the latter really left. As for 4C's, its members glared at him for quite some time before leaving altogether. "Why are we not taking down that bozo?" someone indignantly asked Youthful Reflection. Youthful Reflection had not been able to locate that incriminating letter after getting sent out of the PvP arena. Truly, he was just like Cyangle in Sao Superscript 1 and caused the other 99 members of his mercenary group to fall for Gufei's vile actions. This matter had now reached the ears of Oathless Sword and Gale Force, the two other core members of Traversing 4C's. There was already bad blood between Gufei's 27,149 persona and Traversing 4C's. Back then, the guild had lost considerable face with that no-smile business. Although Traversing 4C's had eventually emerged as Yunjuan City's #1 guild, top brasses like Oathless Sword and Gale Force had always felt that that incident had tarnished the guild's image. Without that incident, there would not be a dispute regarding who was the #1 guild between Traversing 4C's and Corrals. However, when all was said and done, It was entirely the result of No Smile's despicable actions. Even if the players of Traversing Four Seas wished to take revenge, they simply did not have the face to dig up old issues like that. They could only silently suffer this disastrous loss at that person's hands once more. Attempting to poach the opposing group's member was already an unsavory move. Although their attempt was used to strike back against them, they could at most criticize Gufei for being even more despicable. This matter might resonate well with the other leaders who enjoyed poaching players, but announcing this publicly would be shaky at best. Everyone would definitely mock them. Traversing Four Seas is really distasteful for trying to poach other people's teammates. Serves them right to meet a more unscrupulous person who managed to turn the tables on them. Revealing the matter to the public would only make Gufei seem like an anti-hero of sorts for countering their plan with his ploy, for fighting fire with fire. As leaders of a large guild, they must always consider the bigger picture whenever they handled problems and not rashly decide about matters. Youthful Reflection hated Gufei so much, but he could only grit his teeth at the moment as he told his men, "Let's disperse. We'll discuss this matter later." How would they discuss this matter, though? During the guild match, the three core members of Traversing Four Seas got together and quietly discussed the issue. "That guy is actually a member of Amethyst Rebirth. He. Oathless Sword was the guild leader, yet his thoughts had always been a little off track from the beginning. Under the withering stare of the other two, he quickly changed the subject. What do you two think about this? Kill, ambush, sneak attack, hunt. PvP was the most straightforward solution to problems in online games. Galeforce's thinking was as simple as that. Youthful Reflection felt that killing Gufei was not enough to settle this matter. After losing that incriminating letter, he began to think of ways to use the guild member Royal God Call one way or another for this matter. It would be best if he could let Gufei have a taste of his medicine, yet he could not think of any way to do so and could only leave it somewhere in the back of his mind, to use whenever the chance presented itself. Youthful Reflection was hoping to outsmart the opponent, while Galeforce was suggesting for a more violent approach. Both waited for Oathless Sword to make the final decision. Oathless Sword pondered on this for a long time before saying, "Let's go with Youthful Reflection's suggestion. The members of Young Masters Elite are experts, and we don't know what they are planning. Let's look for a way to strike a blow at these experts as we take care of Thousand Miles Drunk, killing two birds with one stone." Youthful Reflection was nationally 100% in agreement with this decision, while Galeforce reluctantly clenched his fists and chose not to comment. Their current guild match was the least challenging of all their guild matches, so it would hardly affect Traversing Four Seas from clinching victory whether the three core members participated in the fight or not. Predictably, the opponents were completely eradicated across the whole PvP arena within half an hour. Gufei had nothing to do during the guild versus guild tournament. Doing bounty mission was no longer fun for him since he only felt that he was killing noobs, so he decided to grind his level on monsters in the wilderness. When the system notified Gufei of receiving a letter, he barely took note of it and merely continued to joyfully use Kung Fu to kill the surrounding monsters in this particular grinding map. Entering the city to log off, he casually retrieved the letter in the mailbox in one of the city gates. He then looked at the letter's envelope and saw these words on its surface: "Letter of Challenge." Fuck me. Gufei could feel his blood pumping from excitement. Chapter Notes: 1. A fictional character in a short story written by a prominent Chinese writer Lu Xun. The short narrative is about an old widow. The story addresses emotional, spiritual, and psychological breakdown of a human being. Source: https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/lu_xun. Chapter 223. The overly focused speech reading expert Gufei's heart was filled with elation when he actually received a letter of challenge that he had been dreaming of. After admiring the words printed in large font on the envelope's surface for quite some time, Gufei quickly checked the sender's name, Galeforce. With that, he hurriedly tore the envelope open and fished out the letter within. The content of the letter was brief: "Do you dare to have a duel with me? Gufei's blood surged. He immediately toggled the permission setting for his friends list and added Gale Force as a friend, yet he received the notification that the person was not accepting any friend at the moment. Who knew how much blood those leaders would cough up if they found out that there was such a simple method to add Gufei as a friend? Since he could not accept the challenge via private messaging, Gufei hurriedly took out a blank sheet of paper and penned a short response, "Bring it." As soon as he dropped the letter into the mailbox, Gufei began to circle around it while repeating this mantra, "Reply quickly, reply quickly." After circling the mailbox for several minutes, a ding rang out and Gufei shoved his hand into the mailbox without reading the message that came with the system notification. It was indeed Gale Force's reply, "Time and place. Now you can choose the location." Gufei hurriedly sent out this reply. It was only fair for both players to choose the time and place respectively, and Gufei had always acted according to this basic rule. Marshall Field. Gale Force was also standing beside the mailbox on his end, so his reply was just as quick. After replying to Gufei's message, Gale Force impatiently waited for the latter's response. He was not disappointed as Gufei's reply arrived extremely fast. "How do I get there?" "Go 50 meters east from the fighter's dojo." Gale Force replied rather quickly, as if the two were anxious to get this over with. "I won't leave till you arrive." The two mutually said to each other. Gufei was originally planning to log off. Instead, he turned around and made his way toward the fighter's dojo. "I'll log off after the duel." He was rather optimistic about how things would pan out in this upcoming fight. Meanwhile, Gale Force was on his guard against any type of trap. The rumors about this mage had already abounded, and quite a lot of his guildmates had experienced fighting him too. The descriptions about Gufei were plentiful, but Gale Force was still able to catch three main points: close combat, insta-kill, blank. Gale Force believed that these three were the most frightening aspects of this mage. Close combat meant his opponent was versatile in a fight, insta-kill meant he could not afford to make a mistake. Finally, blink meant that his opponent had fast speed at his disposal. Only one conclusion could be taken by putting all these three together: the mage could blink right beside his target and insta-kill him. Most people would probably think of giving up once they heard the mage's fighting style, but Gale Force was not most people. In his eyes, the mage was just like any other that required chanting an incantation to cast a spell. Such a weakness meant that by focusing on the mage's lips while they were fighting, he would somewhat be able to predict what the mage was planning to cast. Everything that happened after learning this would depend on their reaction speed. Many players of course knew of this logic and how to counter it, so a lot of mages came up with a way to prevent this. They would merely murmur their spell incantations during PvP. In fact, it was almost to the point that their voices could only be heard by the system and themselves. This method was ineffective to Gale Force, though, as he had a unique skill. He could skillfully read lips. While the words he lip-read might not be absolutely accurate, he found it easy to tell what a mage was chanting with the few spells mages currently possessed. Since Gufei also had that blink skill, Gale Force had to familiarize himself with how the words were pronounced to activate it. Upon confirming the incantation's content, he felt confident that he could identify it when Gufei would chant the spell with his lip-reading skill. Seeing would allow him to be more assertive, while hearing would cause him to remain passive in a fight. Gale Force's method of grasping how the opposing mage would act through his eyes gave him better chance at winning the fight than someone who was dependent on their ears. Although it would just give him a slight edge, that alone could mean the difference between life and death when experts clashed. This fact increased Gale Force's confidence to proceed with this duel. This method had been useful against mages thus far, so he did not feel any bit of fear going into this duel. Gale Force was not really against Oathless Sword and Youthful Reflection's decision of waiting for a chance to take down Gufei and the rest of the experts of Young Master's Elite. It was just that he had long wanted to beat the mage up ever since that No Smile incident. Unfortunately, the identity of the close combat mage had been unknown before. While his original intention had waned over time, today's incident had caused it to flare up once more. Gale Force's desire to teach Gufei a lesson surged again upon learning of the occurrence in the mercenary PvP tournament. Armed with the knowledge of Gufei's identity this time, Gale Force did not hesitate to send him a letter of challenge. Marshall Field was not a place with a specific use. The field was designed more for the purpose of providing a complimentary backdrop for the fighter's dojo on its right. Naturally, such a purposeless location would not have many players around. When Gufei arrived, he immediately spotted a fighter standing in the middle of the martial field with arms folded across his chest. Gufei knew without a doubt that this man was Gale Force and was thoroughly delighted. Gufei did not recognize the person as one of the 3 core members of Traversing 4 Seas, so he was not elated because of that. Instead, he was happy because the opponent was a fighter. Gufei tried to guess the job class of his challenger as he made his way over, and he felt that the chances of his opponent being a mage were quite high. Because there was still job class disequilibrium in Parallel World when it came to single PvP, the fairest way to have a duel was for both parties to have the same job class. If an archer invited a mage to a duel, it was highly likely for no one in the game besides Gufei to accept the challenge. Ahem, are you Gale Force? Gufei climbed up the stage and greeted the other. Gale Force nodded his head as he coldly regarded the mage. 1,000 miles drunk? While Gufei did not recognize him from their past exchanges, Gale Force also failed to recognize Gufei as the person who had whacked him with a stick before. Gufei also nodded his head to confirm his identity. Shall we begin? I won't be merciful with my strikes, so you should do the same. Gale Force's goal today was to beat Gufei up on the brink of death. That's the best. Gufei also did not like fighting up until a certain point only. This was because it was difficult to hold back, and at the same time, it prevented his opponent from displaying his full might. The 2 men assumed their PvP stances once they were done talking. Gale Force stared closely at Gufei's lips, while Gufei kept his focus on the opponent's joints. Come! The 2 shouted to themselves. Translocation, blank. Gale Force waited with bated breath for Gufei's lips to form these 2 words. The other might just say 1 word instead of 2, but Gale Force was capable of judging the spell with just the word translocation. He fully intended to not let Gufei have a chance to strike first. Gale Force would counterattack the first chance he got. Translocation. Blink. Oi, what are you waiting for? Just blink over to my side and attack me already, so that I can instantly move myself. Gale Force's heart was filled with glee at this prospect. All he thought of was how to counter Gufei's move, so he completely forgot one simple fact. Such a move was usually only done at a critical moment. Gufei mainly learned blink to chase after faster opponents than him. Gale Force did not show any indication that he was faster than Gufei, nor did he reveal any intention of running away. Just from these 2 facts, Gale Force already failed to meet the criteria for Gufei to use his blink skill. He was essentially waiting for something that would not happen. It just so happened that Gufei wanted to observe Gale Force's skill first. As such, he was avidly waiting for the latter to make the first move. One man stared unblinkingly at the other's mouth, and another looked intently at the other man's joints. The 2 unintentionally created a stalemate just like that as both tried to see if they could counter each other's attack. Since neither of them made a move to attack, the 2 unknowingly continued the staring contest for the next 5 minutes. Why have you not attacked yet? Gufei suddenly asked. When Gufei uttered these words, Gale Force immediately dodged to the side while he threw a cross punch, only to stiffly stop his punch halfway and to not finish the move. Ah! Why have you struck already? Gufei asked with an incredulous expression on his face. Gale Force turned to face the side as his cheeks became redder than a persimmon, ready to erupt at the slightest ridiculing from the other. He had been anxiously focusing his entire being on Gufei's lips to form the words for blink that he had subconsciously conditioned himself to do this. Strike once Gufei's lips move. Therefore, once Gufei opened his mouth, Gale Force thoughtlessly threw that punch without registering the exact words the other had uttered. He only came back to his senses when his punch had been executed halfway. This guy has only opened his mouth. He didn't chant the incantation for blink. I've been so focused. The embarrassed Gale Force did not turn his head to face Gufei for the longest time. Gufei, for his part, had a lot of experience when it came to clashes like this, yet he simply could not fathom the purpose behind Gale Force's punch. Seeing the person turn his face away and no longer care about his existence, Gufei could not help but ask, "Are we fighting or not?" "Of course, we're fighting." "Why would we not?" Gale Force abruptly turned to throw a fist toward Gufei, spurring Meteor. It's still this move, huh? Gufei twisted his body to the side to let the punch fly by. Gale Force abruptly cancelled spurring Meteor halfway, leapt in the air, and threw both arms toward Gufei to grapple him. This was a move that he was confident in, yet he failed to grasp onto anything. Was that his blink? Gale Force thought to himself as he raised his head to look. He saw Gufei standing beside him, beaming. With a quick shove, Gufei caused Gale Force to lose his balance midair and collapse to the ground. Gufei quickly sidestepped backward and sighed slightly upon seeing Gale Force remain dazedly sprawled on the ground. Despite being a mage, Gufei was still the most familiar with the fighter job class of Parallel World. His understanding came from his research of the job class, how the skills of a fighter could be sequenced, what sort of change-ups could be used. Gufei had memorized everything related to the job class. The moves that the players were discovering now were entirely within Gufei's knowledge of the job class. Indeed, a fighter beating Gufei was difficult as he or she would actually be facing off against a real fighter. Chapter 224, Black Clothes Get Dusty So Easily. Gufei knew of many possible sequences for the fighter's skills, yet Gale Force only used one of those sequences. The look on Gale Force's face seemed to suggest that he only knew of this combo attack and did not know of any other variations or follow-ups to it. While it might be enough to deal with any average players, it was far lacking when used against a fighting expert like Gufei who knew many counters for it. As he shoved Gale Force, Gufei preemptively took a backstep to avoid the latter's potential leg sweep. But when he saw Gale Force remain dazedly lying on the ground, Gufei could not help but sigh in disappointment. Gufei did not deal Gale Force any damage for him to continue lying on the ground like this, which meant that the latter had only received psychological damage from being bullied by him. Gale Force lay stunned on the ground for quite a while before doing a kip up as he stared at Gufei. Once he saw Gale Force stand up, Gufei suddenly stretched his arms to the front while he leaned his body forward. Forming an acute angle against the ground, he used his right hand to punch Gale Force right in the chest. Is this spurring meteor? Gale Force felt so shocked that the color drained from his face. He would have used his spurring meteor to counter this if this had been a conventional PvP, generating verdict to determine whose punch was stronger. Right now, he remained rooted to the spot. This was because the mage's execution of spurring meteor was definitely out of character. It was impossible for different job classes to possess the same set of skills, be it in scrolls or in weapons. In fact, any skill would not be generated by the wrong job class. This inexplicable occurrence caused Gale Force to momentarily forget about dealing with the attack. He only returned to his senses once Gufei's attack was already upon him. Gale Force was an experienced combatant, so he naturally knew of ways to deal with this incoming spurring meteor. Gale Force decided to take the blow head-on when he realized that he could not dodge it at this point. Gale Force lifted his fists to grab Gufei's shoulders just as the latter's fist struck him squarely on the chest. This was a risky move since spurring meteor could inflict the dizzy status effect, which it would leave the target unable to act once the skill connected. In which case, Gale Force's counterattack would be rendered useless. An expert fighter could easily begin a string of attacks after applying the dizzy status effect, which was why many fighters enjoyed starting a PvP with spurring meteor. Still, at a measly 10% rate, the probability of a fighter's spurring meteor afflicting the dizzy status effect to its target was far lower than a warrior's charge. Skill proficiency would not significantly raise this proc chance, so Gale Force felt that this gamble was largely in his favor. In actuality, the chances of his gamble succeeding were not just largely in his favor, it was pretty much entirely in his favor. Where in the world would Gufei get the spurring meteor skill? He only used the same technique as spurring meteor to throw a punch squarely on Gale Force's chest. Hence, Gale Force's decision to not dodge his attack and to instead grab at Gufei's shoulders immediately made Gufei cry foul. He had suffered plenty of losses in the game. Oftentimes, Gufei would feel exasperated at these MMO players' ability to execute a shameless combat style. Gufei's punch had no damage behind it, nor could it afflict the dizzy status effect. As such, his shoulders ended up being firmly gripped by Gale Force. Gale Force did not think much about it and promptly shifted his arms to execute the level 30 fighter skill, Seismic toss. The greatest feature of a fighter's skill was its quick execution and short cooldown time. These two factors were also why they mostly allocated their points to Spirit. With the cooldown time of Gale Force's seismic toss ending, he used his arms to fling Gufei outward. Seeing that Gufei's punch had not dealt the slightest damage on him, Gale Force immediately realized that Gufei's spurring meteor was nothing more than a mimicry of the skill. Gale Force roared and activated his spurring meteor on Gufei. Gufei was hurtling in the air at the moment. Under the system's strict rules, he could only watch Gale Force's fists land on his body in extreme aggravation. Rushing the toss. This was a simple combo that fighters often used in the beginning of the game. At the current stage of the game, defeating their opponents with those two moves was no longer feasible. The probability of a fighter chaining his attack after this combo depended entirely on the proxing of the dizzy status effect via spurring meteor. The skill itself only had a 10% proc rate, but Gale Force's understanding of the importance of the dizzy status effect to a fighter made him splurge on items that increased this chance. In the end, he managed to bring up the proc rate of his dizzy status effect to 34%. This was already a high proc rate for the dizzy status effect for any fighter, but due to him focusing his gear on this particular aspect, his overall attack power suffered a decline. Had Gale Force focused on increasing his attack power, that seismic toss and spurring meteor of his would have sent Gufei right to the Mage Academy to respawn. Gufei was flung outward when he received Gale Force's punch and tumbled a few times when he fell. Gale regretted using too much strength in that last punch, as there was a limit to how long the dizzy status effect could last. Flinging Gufei for quite a distance effectively wasted these precious seconds and created the possibility of the dizzy status effect to run its course by the time Gale Force reached Gufei's location. Right now, Gale Force's wish was to acquire a skill that would let him move from one spot to another instantly. Gale Force quickly rushed toward Gufei, but in just a few steps, he saw the latter disappear from his sight. Gufei had tumbled outside the platform of Marshall Field. Gale Force sighed deeply. He could only submit to the fact that it would be useless even if the dizzy status effect perked there and then, as his punch had actually brought Gufei right outside the platform. But since this duel was a death match, tumbling outside the platform did not mean that the outcome of the match was decided. Gale Force quickly rushed to the edge of the platform and leapt off it to smash Gufei down. This was a level 36 fighter skill, Swallow Dropkick. Originally, the user was supposed to leap in the sky and extend his leg out to strike down a target, but because Swallow Dropkick was extremely difficult to chain, many clever fighters began using the skill to stamp on a fallen enemy, instead. Over time, players in Parallel World gave it an alternate name, Swallow Smash. Striking an opponent down to the ground after a combo, Swallow Smash could send the target right back to his or her spawn point. This was currently the favorite fighting move of fighters. Gale Force did not actually use the skill to look cool, it just so happened to be the most appropriate skill to land a hit on Gufei from the raised platform. Who knew that his extended leg would actually smash nothing but dirt, as there was no one on the ground. Before Gale Force could even think about anything, something crashed into him from behind and he lost his balance once more. Moreover, his Swallow Smash posture had caused him to fall to the ground on his side rather awkwardly. Gale Force lifted his head and saw Gufei retract his foot from the edge of the platform and shake his head. "You're no good." Translocation. Gale Force was fuming. He had made all the necessary preparations for it, yet he had actually forgotten about it at the critical moment, allowing Gufei to appear right behind him and deliver a kick that caused him to tumble inelegantly. "Alright, I'm off." Gufei waved his hand dismissively. "What? Stop right there." Gale Force did another kip up and scrambled up the platform. Although he received quite the beating from his two falls, Gufei, who had eaten his skills, would have a significantly lower HP. As for him, he was definitely in an advantageous position right now as he barely took any damage from the two falls. Besides, Gufei's blink skill should currently be on cooldown after using it, so why would Gale Force let go of such an opportunity? With that thought in mind, Gale Force did not speak with Gufei anymore and merely lifted his hand to score a punch on Gufei using the most basic fighter skill, Heavy punch. Gufei slightly tilted his body to let the punch pass him and threw a lightning-fast uppercut on Gale Force's jaw. He proceeded to thrust a kick onto the stunned Gale Force's shoulder, using the impetus to leap into the air and bring the soles of his dirty boots glancing over Gale Force's cheeks in his downward roll. Using his falling momentum, Gufei grabbed a hold of Gale Force's waist with his arms, but he soon shook his head with a sigh. "I can't toss you." Gufei let go of Gale Force's waist, brushed the dust off the latter's shoulder, and said, "You got what I was trying to do, though, right?" Gale Force was rendered speechless by what he had just witnessed. Everything Gufei had just done incorporated the fighter job class's skills: uppercut punch, thrusting kick, swallow drop kick, and seismic toss. Just like the spurring meteor skill that Gufei had used before, his attacks were merely for show and did not have a bit of damage in them. However, the sequencing of moves that Gufei had executed far outstripped those that were executed by other fighters. Uppercut punch, thrusting kick, and swallow dropkick has a follow-up move to strike down an enemy from midair. This was a combo that many fighters dreamed of but could not achieve. But this person, although his uppercut punch and thrusting kick could not lift the target midair, Gale Force knew that if he truly had the actual skills, that follow-up swallow dropkick and finishing move seismic toss. If spurring meteor was added into that, he would be executing the full skill kit of a fighter right now. The resulting damage from this combo would definitely be a sight to behold. How did you do it?" Gale Force hurriedly asked. "Tempo. Watch your tempo. It needs to be faster," Gufei explained. "Tempo?" Gale Force pressed on, baffled. Gufei thought for a bit and figured he needed to speak in a language that this sort of people understood. "Watch the cancels of your skills." "Oh." Gale Force instantly understood what he meant. The timing of the skill cancels decides if the combo can be executed in one smooth motion, so you need to practice more. Gufei said this solemnly. Gale Force nodded his head blankly. What was this? A mage was actually pointing out to him, a fighter, the proper way to sequence his attacks into that combo. "Keep practicing," Gufei said once more before patting his robe and leaving. He had taken a tumble outside of the raised platform, so Gufei's robe had become dirty all over. Black clothes get dusty so easily. Gale Force could vaguely hear Gufei saying this. Chapter 225, Come Before the Storm. Gufei felt quite depressed as he logged off. He rarely had the chance to pit himself against fighters, but due to him having an easier time beating them than the other job classes, now that he finally had a chance to go up against one, he somehow ended up giving the fighter Gale Force a shock, and that was done without pulling out his Moonlit Night flaws. This was entirely due to Gufei's high standard when it came to Kung Fu. The fighter job class in Parallel World was probably designed using the data that had been gathered from some real-life Kung Fu instructors. But since Gufei was a rare top-tier talent in the field of Kung Fu, those instructors would probably not even come close to his level of martial arts. Just the simplicity of the skills and concepts that they had provided for this game was enough proof that their Kung Fu talent was nothing to brag about. Gufei went up the rooftop to practice Kung Fu after he had logged off from the game. Taking out a sandbag, he performed the various skills of the fighter job class, such as uppercut punch, thrusting kick, swallow drop kick, seismic toss, and spurring meteor. Despite giving his sandbag a good thrashing, Gufei still could not help but sigh to himself, so simple. Truly, it was a pity that his execution of these skills could not generate any damage in-game. He did not even have the strength to properly execute seismic toss. In actuality, without the system temporarily gifting the fighters the strength to perform seismic toss on any sort of opponent whenever they felt like it, they would not be able to execute the skill either. While Gufei was busy practicing Kung Fu on the rooftop, Gale Force was still on the platform at the martial field in-game. He was trying to chain the very same skills that Gufei had so effortlessly performed before his eyes a while ago to no success. How is this easy? Gale Force sighed. Tempo. Canceling. He repeated these words to himself as sweat trained on the platform due to his exertion. Meanwhile, on Yeonju City's forums, Young Masters Elite's consecutive wins in the Mercenary PvP tournament had left everyone surprised. The six-man mercenary group's journey toward the semifinals was nothing to scoff at, as the opponents that they had defeated along the way were real heavyweights in the mercenary PvP tournament. The level 4 mercenary groups Cloud Herder and High Cloud, another tournament Dark Horse Silver Moon, the budding mercenary group Amethyst that many considered to be worthy of being acknowledged as a dark horse as well, and the top mercenary group 4Cs that consisted of the elite members of the number 1 guild traversing 4Cs. All these mercenary groups were not just any ordinary entities in Yunjuan City. This was especially true of 4Cs. Although that mercenary group had fewer completed missions compared to the Black Hand, it was widely regarded as the strongest based on raw talent and power. In any case, the final 4 mercenary groups in the semi-finals were as follows: Young Masters Elite, the Black Hand, Waterflower, Under Carouse Guild, and Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds. Although the name Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds sounded fanciful, the mercenary group itself was average at best. What everyone could not fathom, though, was how Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds had managed to reach level 4 despite being backed by just the level 3 guild-colored clouds. The level 4 mercenary group with its 80 members had truly been blessed, for it had never once met a strong mercenary group or a dark horse in the mercenary PvP tournament. The most difficulty that Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds had experienced during the tournament was when it had been matched up against some equally mediocre level 3 or level 4 mercenary groups. Nonetheless, during those times, they somehow managed to obtain a Pyrrhic victory. Others did not have much interest toward Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds, as most of their attention was on how far Young Masters Elite could go in the PvP tournament. With the conclusion of today's guild match, the semi-finals opponent of Young Masters Elite was announced as Waterflower, while the Black Hand would be facing Rainbow Betwixt the Clouds. At this moment, Young Master Han and Brave Surge, the guild leader of Carouse, were together in Ray's bar. "So this group's actually your creation. Say, why didn't you join Waterflower?" Brave Surge asked, feeling rueful. Young Masters Elite's recent deeds were just too controversial. Even if people could not find out about all its members, they were at least able to find the name of the mercenary group's leader by looking it up at the Hall of Mercenaries. Most people would not know who this young Master Han was, but any members of Carouse Guild would naturally know. After all, the name of the guild Young Master Han belonged to was listed right next his name. Young Master Han only laughed in response. "This means that you already know that Mage," Brave Surge stated. When Young Master Han did not deny his claim, he continued, "You saw how tough it was for us to find him, so why did you not say a word?" "He won't let me." Young Master Han easily pushed the blame on Goofy for this. Brave Surge acknowledged his reason and said, "When the match is over, bring your friend to join our guild. It's more fun when there are more people." Young Master Han flashed him a wry smile. "In a small group like ours, we do everything by majority vote. I'm only the group leader in name, and I still need to discuss everything with everyone. Of course, that's a given. How about you invite everyone to have a drink with us?" Brave Surge persisted. "How about tomorrow after the match?" Young Master Han would never reject an offer to drink. "Have you done your preparations on how to face us?" Brave Surge casually asked. He more or less had a good idea of what Young Master Han was capable of. "Not yet." Young Master Han smiled secretively, also asking, "How many men are you intending to send out?" "I haven't thought of it, either." Brave Surge flashed him an equally secretive smile. "I guess we'll talk about it later, then." Young Master Han concluded. "Yes, let's do that," Brave Surge agreed, saying, "I'll take my leave first, enjoy yourself." With that, he waved his hand. "Ray, I'll take care of the bill for this table." "Surely there's no need?" Young Master Han pretended to decline. "No need to be courteous, we're in the same guild, after all." Brave Surge laughed boisterously. Ray looked over to Young Master Han for confirmation and the latter nodded his head. Ray immediately brought the bill over to Brave Surge. The smile on Brave Surge's lips slightly wavered upon seeing the bill and he remarked, "You're quite the drinker. It's better if I take care of the bill myself." Young Master Han chuckled. However, Brave Surge already said that he would take care of his bill, so how could a guild leader like him not be a man of his word? He instantly fished out his coin pouch and settled Young Master Han's bill of over 100 gold coins. The sum itself was not exorbitant, but this was a question of where the money went to. Brave Surge would hardly bat an eyelid if he spent that amount on equipment and such, but spending that amount on liquor made his heart ache. You should drink less, it's not good for your body. Brave Surge advised with a slightly fearful voice before leaving in a hurry. How the hell would drinking liquor in-game harm the body? Young Master Han calmly took the tab and asked Ray while scanning it, "Did you include the tab for the entire week?" As Ray nodded his head, young Master Han said, "That's the sort of quality you should look for in a boss." Ray could only smile in response to this. Nothing else happened that night. When Gufei got online the next day and made his way over to Ray's bar for the pre-match meeting, he was met with a never-before-seen situation. Inside Ray's bar, young Master Han and the rest were currently not inside their usual private room. Instead, they were sitting and drinking together in the bar lounge with Brave Surge and company, whom their group was matched up with for today's round of the mercenary PvP tournament. Both sides were discussing about their respective strategies for today's match. What an awkward yet harmonious scene this was. Gufei did not know what to say to this. "We meet again." Brave Surge flashed Gufei a warm smile, inviting, "Come take a seat." Gufei repeated himself, not knowing whether to agree or decline the offer. "I'm treating everyone to a round of drinks." Brave Surge smiled pleasantly. "Didn't we agree on drinking after the match?" Young Master Han asked, puzzled. "Drink now and expend all that alcohol in your system during the fight later, wouldn't that be better?" Brave Surge encouraged. Young Master Han thought for a moment before smiling, "You're just afraid that I'll drink non-stop after the match." Brave Surge felt slightly embarrassed that his plot had been seen through. He was actually not a petty person, but young Master Han's expenditures had truly given him a fright. How long had it been from the end of mercenary PvP tournament to their yesterday's meeting? For him to drink that much in such a short time, Brave Surge was convinced that young Master Han could bankrupt him with his drinking if he was given free rein after the match. Nonetheless, the sight of the two sides that would be fighting one another in today's PvP match harmoniously drinking together was just too strange. All the people present did not know what to say to this, so they merely chose to quietly drink the cups of liquor in their hands. "Are we fighting you guys today?" Gufei asked Brave Surge, as he just found out about it now. As Brave Surge nodded his head, Gufei praised, "Your spell bombardment is really powerful." Brave Surge very humbly replied, "Oh, it's alright." Gufei sent out a message, "Svalti, lend me your magic resistance equipment again, I'm about to fight that guy with that strong spell bombardment." Svelte Dancer came barging inside Ray's bar before long. She also expressed her surprise at the strange sight of the two competing teams sitting and drinking together. "Over here!" Gufei quickly called out. Big Sis Zioxy won. Royal Godcall was more excited than Gufei. "Hi, Zia." War Without Wounds faked a calm greeting. Svelte Dancer waved to everyone before coming to Gufei's side and handing him the equipment. "What's all this about?" "Guild leader Brave Surge here is treating us to some liquor." Gufei chuckled. Brave Surge recognized the one before him as the prestigious Svelte Dancer. He hurriedly greeted her and quickly called Ray to bring her a drink as well. Inside, he was wondering, this is the richest player in the entire server of Parallel World. Does that mean the only worthy beverage in her eyes is the most expensive one? Svelte Dancer was not passionate about drinking, so she was naturally not fussy over this stuff. She only came here to deliver the equipment Gufei had requested. After handing it over to him, she bade everyone farewell and left. "Look, this coat right here has 73% magic resistance, pretty impressive, yeah?" Gufei proudly showed the item to Brave Surge. "Impressive." Brave Surge affirmed, yet his eyes was not looking at the equipment Gufei was holding. Instead, he was staring at the more impressive living thing before him. Even if both sides were cordial right now, they were still going to fight against one another later. Why would anyone show such equipment with high magic resistance this easily? This guy. Just how high is this guy's self-confidence? Brave Surge sighed in awe. Chapter 226, Where is the Trap? Inside Ray's bar, the two teams drank liquor rather amiably. Gufei kept the equipment Svelte Dancer had lent him as Brave Surge busily made his calculations. If the item truly had 73% magic resistance, then it would almost be like having a cheat. Normally, He would have to hit Gufei with Descending Wheel of Flames thrice to kill the latter off. If Gufei wore the coat, it would take 11 of those spells to finish him off. That was a really high requirement. Although Waterflower Mercenary Group was under Corral's guild, the strength of the guild and mercenary group was not really the same. This was mainly because of the member limitation each type of organization had. While Corral's guild could create a spell bombardment consisting of over 100 mages, Waterflower Mercenary Group with its 80 members could not. Creating an all-mage mercenary group was not probable, as defeating a team that did not have a balanced job class distribution was as easy as pie. With such a condition, Waterflower would have a hard time employing a mage formation. Waterflower was already on the weaker side, but with Gufei bringing an item with 73% magic resistance, the group's mages would be nothing more than matchsticks for him. How on earth are we going to fight him? Looks like I have to come up with a whole new plan. Brave Surge started to ponder on the matter for a while. Not much time was left until the matches start. All were constantly checking the time, wanting their involvement in this awkward drinking session to end. When someone mumbled, "It's almost time," the rest of them hurriedly voiced their assent and quickly stood up from their seats. Everyone said to either side, "See you on the map." With tacit understanding, young Master's elite left the bar via the left door while Waterflower exited the establishment through the right door. Both sides also took different routes to head over to the teleportation array. The pre-PvP meeting that had turned into a quiet drinking session due to Brave Surge's sudden appearance had to be conducted on the road, instead. Since young Master Han was a member of Corral's guild, he provided the information about their opponents for today's match, given that the members of Waterflower Mercenary Group were made up of the elites of Corral's. All, except for Sword Demon, gawked at young Master Han when he recited with ease the details of all the 80 members of Waterflower. Most of them zoned him out near the end, yet they were all impressed at young Master Han's nearly eidetic memory. Even Brother Assist had to refer to his information booklet when giving out information. "That's 80 people. The 6 of them arrived by the teleportation array when they said this." Actually, Royal Godcall was still counting with his fingers the number of players young Master Han had mentioned as they entered the changing room. "Is that all 80 of them?" "Yup." Brother Assist nodded his head. Having ample knowledgeable of statistics and data collection, he could not help but exclaim, "It's such a waste for you to not do information gathering." "Any field that doesn't have me suffers a loss," young Master Han said. Everyone was no longer in the mood to praise him upon hearing his bragging. "Since you have a good understanding of the entire Waterflower, does that mean that you are certain of our victory for this match?" Brother Assist asked. "It's somewhat useful, but that's hardly relevant," young Master Han replied, saying, "I just enjoy seeing you guys look on me with admiration as I speak." "Get lost." Everyone immediately glared at him contemptuously, making sure to put as much hate in their eyes. With not much time left until the matches start, 72 players of Waterflower hurriedly entered the changing room. It seemed that the remaining 8 members had something on and would not be participating in the match. In no time at all, the 10-second countdown ended and both sides were transported into the real PvP arena, officially beginning the semi-finals of the Mercenary PvP tournament. "Where's the high ground?" They all limbered up and impatiently asked this of young Master Han. Young Master Han snorted, "Many people thought they could see through me, yet they were sorely mistaken." "Fine. We're all mistaken. Stop playing mind games with us and just tell us of your plan. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go and face them head on." Gufei could no longer stand his cryptic words. "Follow me." Young Master Han headed forward. The 5 men exchanged looks before following young Master Han. Brother Assist once more tried to find some confidence from Sword Demon, yet he did not get his wish this time, as Sword Demon's current expression showed a hint of doubt. "Sword Demon." Brother Assist's voice trembled as he called out. Sword Demon offered without prompting. There was this one time that someone had guessed his intention, so he intentionally changed the original plan to something else. After that, "Did you lose?" Brother Assist anxiously interrupted. "No, we won. But our losses were greater than what we would have incurred had we stuck to the original plan." Even the guy who had figured out his plan was among the casualties, Sword Demon answered. "Wow, he is really vicious." Gufei, who was eavesdropping on Brother Assist and Sword Demon's conversation, could not help but exclaim this. Is he going to send us all to our death? Royal Godcall asked with trepidation. He can't do that if everyone's at fault. Didn't everyone shout at him just now? Brother Assist asked. I didn't shout, Sword Demon replied. I, too, Goofy seconded. You're lying. I was right beside you, so I clearly heard your shout. Royal Godcall exposed Goofy. Calm down, young man. While you only have the possibility of young master sending you to your death, I can guarantee that you will die if you insist on claiming I shouted at him just now, Goofy threatened. I'm not gonna live either way, anyway. Each of you is more fiendish than the last. Royal Godcall was in tears. The five did not say anything more when young Master Han brought them inside a forest. After a short distance, young Master Han stopped and turned around. The sunlight filtering through the leaves of the surrounding trees illuminated his face. His expression looked even more sinister under that mottled light, giving the five men goosebumps. Alright, climb up. Young Master Han suddenly ordered. Up where? The five men asked cautiously. Up the tree. Young Master Han slapped the tree beside him. Oh, just up the tree. The five men sighed in relief before hurriedly asking, why are we going up the tree? It's a tactic. Young Master Han answered. Tactic? The five expressed their skepticism as they were wary of being tormented by young Master Han. Young Master Han decided to set himself as an example and had Sword Demon give him a boost to climb up the tree first. Once he climbed high enough, he looked around for a bit before calling the others to join him. Miles and Royal, you two climb up first. The two were stunned. Honestly speaking, they had been the most vocal in ordering young Master Han to head to a high ground. Royal Godcall was a teenager, so naturally he did not care about the volume of his voice when speaking. As for Goofy, being a teacher had made him used to raising his voice to get the attention of an entire class, so he somewhat failed to realize how loud he was. Is this truly a trap to take revenge on us? The two thought to themselves. I can't climb up the tree. Royal Godcall immediately tried to escape. I'll help you up. War Without Wounds was naturally glad to see Royal Godcall suffer, so he quickly grabbed a hold of the escaping Royal Godcall. Wounds, you asshole. Go eat shit. Royal Godcall cursed. War Without Wounds was not bothered by his cursing and merely found a low-hanging branch to toss Royal Godcall over. Royal Godcall attempted to jump down from the low-hanging branch, yet War Without Wounds sadistically positioned the tip of his sword toward Royal Godcall. Royal Godcall quickly grabbed onto the tree trunk once he realized what would happen to him if he fell. Over there. Head over there. Young Master Han directed Royal Godcall to a certain section of the tree. Royal Godcall carefully moved atop the tree, occasionally checking for an opportunity to drop to the ground. Unfortunately for him, War Without Wounds was keeping an eye on him from below. Goofy joined War Without Wounds and staring at him, even sending him a message, just check it out. Don't worry, I'll save you if there's danger. Royal Godcall felt helpless in this situation. He could only cry bitter tears inside for having acquired such a vile bunch of friends. With young Master Han's direction, Royal Godcall climbed higher and higher up the tree. He no longer had any intention of accidentally taking a misstep and falling to the ground with how high he was up the tree. Instead, he began to gingerly test the sturdiness of the tree branches. He would not put it past young Master Han to do something like make him stand on a tree branch that could not hold his weight. Truly, deciphering young Master Han's thoughts was a difficult affair. As Royal Godcall safely got to his designated spot, his inbox immediately burst into activity. So how is it? Is there anything unusual up there? Goofy and the rest inquired. They used me as a guinea pig. Royal Godcall was angry at everyone's inquiry. Miles, you should hurry up, too. Get over to that position right there, young Master Han instructed as he pointed toward another location atop the tree. He then called out to the other three men, everyone, come on up. Randomly find a place to hide. War Without Wounds had the highest strength among them, so he officially became the helper of everyone to climb up the tree. Lifting Brother Assist and Sword Demon up the tree, he then turned his gaze over to Goofy. No need, Goofy refused his aid. Pointing his finger to a certain tree branch, he said, translocation, blank. With a swish, Goofy was already standing on that spot. I know you don't need my help, I want you to give me a boost. War Without Wounds fumed. Goofy glanced at his burly frame before neutrally asking, Is that even possible? Indeed, getting War Without Wounds up the tree was problematic. Only after a few of them worked together did they manage to pull him up the tree. Goofy sighed repeatedly once he saw War Without Wounds' clumsy posture on the tree branch. I think it's best if you don't join us up here. He then proceeded to lift Sword Demon up the tree as he continued to teleport himself from branch to branch. Good. Train your blink skill a bit more. You'll be using it shortly, young Master Han said. Okay. What now? What do we do next? Brother Assist asked. Besides War Without Wounds, everyone else was already in position. We're waiting for Brave Surge to find us, young Master Han replied with a slight smile. What if he can't find us? Of course, he will. If the herder could find us, why couldn't he? Then, what do we do after that? This was what everyone was really concerned about. This entire forest is a trap prepared for them. Oh. Everyone sighed in relief. It turned out that young Master Han at least had the decency to exclude them from this trap for Brave Surge and his men. Chapter 227, The Tenacious Uncle Wounds. All were quiet in the forest as War Without Wounds clumsily shifted himself atop the tree. Parallel World was mainly designed to follow the laws of physics and logic, so any branch that could normally bear a person with average weight would simply splinter with War Without Wounds on it. They did not really care if War Without Wounds died by falling from the tree. What everyone was worried of was that the loud sound of his fall would attract Brave Surge and his men over. Since this is a trap, why don't we have someone lure them over? One of them asked young Master Han. The later they come, the better for us. If they assume that we are not planning to ambush them but are merely hiding from them, they'll be less vigilant. Our plan will be evident if we try to lure them here, young Master Han explained. Thus, the 6 men of young Master's elite continued to camp atop the tree. Outside the forest, Brave Surge was currently leading his men to look for any traces of young Master's elite. After asking the other mercenary groups that had lost to young Master's elite previously, Brave Surge learned that the key to defeating this team was not to divide their manpower. The 6 men were elites of the elites, so none of the players of Waterflower knew exactly how great the catalytic reaction they would get when the entire group was gathered together. Since Brave Surge had no wish to use his men to gauge this was the only choice left for him. All 72 members of Waterflower maintained a tight formation as they searched through the map for their opponents. 72 versus 6. The size of this map was about the same as the map when young Master's elite had gone up against Cloud Herder. And yet, Brave Surge could not find even a shadow of the 6 enemies when he brought his 71 men to the highest vantage point of the map. Blind spots, such as ditches, depressions, forests, and back of hills, existed from where he stood. Brave Surge could only leave a mercenary on the high ground to be their lookout as he brought the other members to search all these aforementioned blind spots for their enemies. Following along the ditches, looking inside the land depressions, and traversing through hills and forests, Waterflower searched everywhere but still could find any member of young Master's elite. 21 minutes had passed since the beginning of this match and there were only 47 minutes left. Being unable to locate the enemies left Brave Surge feeling anxious. Brave Surge's Carouse Guild had once lost a match due to the grand kiting strategy, and it was a ridiculous loss, too. Despite having over 600 men at his disposal at the time, they had not been able to catch Svelte Dancer. Therefore, he was really wary of the said strategy to the point of not wanting to leave that one man atop that hill. He kept looking back at that single man as they left the vantage point for fear of the man getting killed. He was deathly afraid of losing the match with a score of 0 against 1. That fortunately did not happen, yet Brave Surge remained anxious of not finding any member of young Master's elite. He could almost perceive the opponent's intention. They were intentionally stalling for time. The grand kiting strategy was more effective near the end of the match, so the later the fighting occurred, the better it was for the opposing side. Perhaps, they would only reveal themselves in the final 5 minutes of the match, letting their archer insta-kill one of his men. How bitter would such a loss be? No. This can't continue like this. Brave Surge was well aware of this fact, yet he just could not locate the enemies. His lookout by the vantage point confidently stated that he saw no movement from the opposing team, and they also found no one in the blind spots that they had gone to, so where were those 6 men? Brave Surge and the other 71 members of Waterflower racked their brains. Compared to just one man thinking, The idea that could be generated with 70 men putting their heads together was truly amazing. Finally, someone thought of something, up in the trees. That's the only place we have yet to check. The others immediately regarded that idea in earnest. Indeed, they must be up the trees. There were forests and trees all over this PvP arena, so they could literally be hiding anywhere. Without sparing another moment, Brave Surge immediately brought his men to comb through the map together. The 6 members of Young Master's elite hiding between the leaves and branches of a tree had previously seen Waterflower's men pass by them. Some enemy players had even lifted their heads, yet they had done it so casually that they were unable to spot the well-hidden members of Young Master's elite. Adding the fact that there was poor lighting within the trees and looking up the treetops would often face the glare of the sun, none of them was able to spot anything strange. After the enemies left the first time, Young Master Han warned everyone, the next time they come by, they are surely aware of the fact that we are atop a tree. The second round of searching came not too long after. Brave Surge and his men were pretty lucky, as they managed to stumble upon the forest that the 6 men of Young Master's elite were hiding. It was the second out of the 5 forests in the map that they had searched out. They had already established a search method in the first forest. Once they entered the second forest, the Waterflower's mages and archers relentlessly unleashed their spells and arrows on the trees, warriors slammed themselves against the trees, and the other job classes prepared for a fight to begin once any enemies fell down. That was when Young Master Han sent out a message on the mercenary channel, "Hold fast." Following this, he sent Goofy a private message, "Prepare to attack using Uriao spell, Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno." Whereat? Goofy asked. "Just drop it wherever someone falls down." Young Master Han replied. Goofy's heart shuddered. Would Young Master Han's habit of using his men as bait ever change? Young Master Han quickly sent out this follow-up message, "Even if I fall, don't you dare show mercy. Don't worry, I'll be even more vicious." Goofy answered helplessly. This was but a game, after all, so sacrificing even himself was fair game here. No matter how others criticized him for his vicious method, Goofy knew that Young Master Han was absolutely remorseless about it deep inside. This narcissistic person was probably thinking right now, if even my mighty self can be sacrificed, then any of you inferior beings can be, too. Affairs of the human heart were never that easy to figure out, as all always valued themselves the most. People would naturally hail someone for sacrificing himself or herself for others, but it would be hard to justify and understand the necessity of such sacrificial act if others were unwillingly dragged along to die as well. Whatever the case might be, this was how Young Master Han had intended to fight in this match. Goofy could not help but admit that this callous tactic was effective. Hold fast. Young Master Han told everyone this. Goofy knew that the others would understand his reasoning if Young Master Han explained it to them, so why must he do it in a hurtful way? Young Master Han's personality was truly very unpleasant. As he sighed, he heard the sound of a human falling from a tree on his left side. War Without Wounds tried so hard to remain steady in his position, yet he was still the first to fall to the ground. Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno, arise! Goofy quickly chanted as he pointed to where War Without Wounds had fallen, feeling discomforted the entire time. This was one example of the usefulness of Goofy's long casting time. When War Without Wounds fell from the tree, the men of Waterflower naturally went to surround him, so if the spell had a short casting time, it would erupt even before the enemies arrived by War Without Wounds' side, essentially wasting his effort and mana. Due to the spell delay, plenty of men who had gathered by War Without Wounds' vicinity were implicated in the spell's eruption. Boom! Amid the flames, Goofy saw War Without Wounds stand up and unleash his cyclone. Although War Without Wounds was just a typically mortal uncle, he was never passive in a fight. Proof of this was that he always made sure to have enough rage points to unleash Cyclone. When War Without Wounds started Cyclone, the flames in the surrounding area seemed to ignite even faster with the skill's force. Even War Without Wounds himself was heartlessly engulfed by the raging inferno. The unsuspecting men of Waterflower, who were in the midst of celebrating the fact that they had finally found a foe, were soon turned into streams of white light by the raging inferno. Some were able to survive this attack due to having better equipment at level 40. Although Goofy was holding on to the level 70 Moonlit Nightfalls, His low intelligence prevented him from unleashing the sword's full spell damage. Moreover, the weapon's dual attributes of physical damage and magic damage meant either of those was limited to the level 60 standard. With such stats, he would even be unable to insta-kill those job classes with low HP were it not for the fact that Gufei was wearing Midnight Spirit Robe that increased his magic attack power by a lot. Waterflower Mercenary Group was filled with the skilled players of Carouse Guild. There were even some low HP players that had top grade equipment among them, so they were able to survive Gufei's spell, albeit their faces went pale when they saw how low their HP had dipped. Among those that survived was War Without Wounds. War Without Wounds had also not fallen despite suffering the full might of Gufei's AO spell, so he had not given up either. Those that had rushed toward him were players with fast speed but low HP, so plenty of them were killed off by Gufei's spell. War Without Wounds stopped his cyclone and charged toward a nearby warrior with a mighty bellow. This warrior had just taken damage from Gufei's spell, so he had lost quite a chunk of HP. With the ensuing burn effect of the Raging Inferno, he hurriedly attempted to retreat from the spell's AO. Unfortunately for the enemy warrior, War Without Wounds cancelled Cyclone and activated Charge toward him to also escape the still burning flames that sought to consume the players within the spell's AO. War Without Wounds Charge hit the man and the latter was flung out with his butt still on fire, turning into a beam of white light before he even landed on the ground. War Without Wounds roared once more as he brandished his claymores and cleaved hard at another enemy player that had yet to die, sending the latter hurtling toward a tree. He did not use a skill for this strike, so the damage was low. The player who had just been thrown into the tree blankly stared at the now fleeing War Without Wounds. War Without Wounds proved his awareness of his current situation of being dealt continuous damage by Gufei's spell by quickly leaping away from its AO once he cleared the two enemy players blocking his path. However, the men of Waterflower had once more surrounded him. War Without Wounds no longer had much HP after taking the brunt of Gufei's spell, yet he maintained his tenacious resistance. Chance. Young Master Han quickly sent Gufei this message, cast another one. Gufei, who had been expecting his message, readied his sword as he typed, Roger. He then shouted, Descending Wheel of Flames. Young Master Han was angered by his action and fired off another message. What are you yelling for? Gufei did not reply to him this time. This was because he had gracefully leapt off the tree after saying the incantation. Chapter 228, A Priest's Golden Ratio. Brave Surge, who was taking the lead in this assault, calmed his panicking men. When Gufei's blazing tree of 1,000 Inferno sprouted from beneath the ground, all the members of Waterflower Mercenary Group started to panic as they knew full well just how high Gufei's spell damage was. What was worse was that everyone had been caught unaware by this sneaky attack and had no means to dodge it in time. To make matters worse, none of them had any idea where the spellcaster who had unleashed the spell was, despite having lost quite a few of their compatriots as the fire raged on. The melee job classes surrounded War Without Wounds as Brave Surge brought the mages, archers, and other ranged job classes to search for Gufei. From Brave Surge's combat experience, he could tell where Gufei was situated when he cast Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno. He was sure that Gufei was near them, so he and the rest of Waterflower only searched within the nearby area. Just as they aimed their magic staves and bows toward the treetops, Gufei's loud cry of Descending Wheel of Flames traveled over to their ears. As everyone was once again panicking over Gufei's spell, Brave Surge quickly hollered, Calm down. Watch for the spell and react accordingly. Descending Wheel of Flames was incomparable to Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno, as it would always take some time to come crashing down onto the ground, so any job class with decent speed should be able to somehow dodge it. And yet, the flame wheel never came to be. Instead, Gufei was the one that had come crashing down on them from the tree above after he had yelled out the incantation. Gufei was falling so fast that no one registered it in time, much less attack him. All they saw was Gufei diving headfirst, his feet pointed toward the sky, toward where War Without Wounds was making his last stand. Gufei's hand suddenly moved to draw out his moonlit nightfalls midair. Extending the sword past his head with his wrist slightly angled, he yelled grandly, Unifying Heaven and Earth. Twin Incineration. Incinerate. Everyone felt unsure of what sort of spell he had just chanted. Shortly after, They saw a fiery dragon burst forth from Gufei's sword tip and rapidly spiraled downward right before him. He had actually used twin incineration to draw out a miniature version of descending wheel of flames by his hand. Gufei descended on the space War Without Wounds was occupying. As the circle of fire he drew blazingly revolved around all the players, closing in on War Without Wounds. The spell damage of Gufei's twin incineration was on another level compared to all his other spells due to his high proficiency of it. As for the words that came before the incantation, Gufei was not talking gibberish. The technique Gufei performed as he dove down was Gu's family's sword style, and it was called Unifying Heaven and Earth. So cool. War Without Wounds was extremely moved by Gufei's unexpected assistance. He yelled at the top of his lungs and raised his arms to catch the falling Gufei. This was a simple task for a barbaric warrior like him. However, Gufei instead used his offered arms to twist his body parallel to the ground. With his left hand grabbing a hold of War Without Wounds' shoulder, he kicked out toward a player standing by the outer circle and hit the target's face. That kick was not the end of it. Gufei began stepping on every player around with War Without Wounds acting as the fulcrum. His kicks resounded and the enemies around War Without Wounds were all given a footprint on their faces. Since his mage character had low strength, Gufei's kicks were more like light taps that produced imprints starting from their foreheads down to their chins. "Give me a boost," he hurriedly requested from War Without Wounds. War Without Wounds thought Gufei had some sort of ultimate move left, so he pushed the ladder upward. War Without Wounds' mighty strength allowed Gufei to soar 2 meters in the air and strike a majestic pose. Mid-air, Gufei pointed his finger toward a certain location and chanted, "Translocation, blank." With a swish, Gufei disappeared from his position. War Without Wounds' eyes nearly fell out when he saw this and he angrily shouted, "Fuck, and you dare call yourself a bro?" Gufei was originally just a meter off the ground, but with War Without Wounds' help, he floated for 2 more meters. This allowed Gufei to reappear somewhere 8 meters off the ground, among the branches and leaves, to be exact. Adding the 5-meter radius of his blink, none managed to see where Gufei had teleported himself. The entire forest became quiet once more. Gufei dove from the sky, insta-killed a whole circle of players with his twin incineration, gave everyone around War Without Wounds an imprint each through seemingly shadowless kicks, and subsequently left the scene without landing his feet on the ground. Everything happened in a brief moment, leaving everyone breathless with his fighting rhythm and flawlessly chained movement. This was especially true of those whose faces and noses were unceremoniously drawn on by Gufei. They were currently holding their faces while staring blankly upward. War Without Wounds was still in a precarious position, but his lack of morals resurfaced once he realized that everyone around him was seemingly petrified. The men of Waterflower awakened from their stupor just as he was about to sneak off. The opposing men halted their contemplation of Gufei's brilliant intervention and collectively struck War Without Wounds with their weapons. War Without Wounds no longer heroically took the enemy's attacks like before. Fending off some of the enemy's attacks, he wailed, "Miles, fucking hurry up and save me. Bro. Just die in peace." As War Without Wounds received this message from Gufei, he caught sight of a spark of fire coming into existence above him and the real flame wheel came crashing toward him. He had already suffered Gufei's blazing tree of 1,000 inferno as well the Waterflower's men's attacks, so War Without Wounds would surely not survive Gufei's recently cast descending wheel of flames. Just as he waited for his impending death, a pure white light enveloped him. This light's appearance was not due to him dying but was due to a priest bestowing heal on him. War Without Wounds once more survived Gufei's spell with this heal. However, his HP reached a point where even a light tap would send him out of the PvP arena. Fortunately for him, a series of heal landed on him after the first and his HP began to recover in no time. "You're willing to lend him a hand?" Gufei asked, shocked. "MHM, War Without Wounds equipment isn't bad, and he has done well to survive this far, so I'm letting him be the bait for much longer," young Master Han replied. On the opposing team, Brave Surge recognized the quick and efficient heal of the all-spirit build priest young Master Han. There were 2 qualities to a priest's heal. First was its speed and second was its effect. Speed included the casting time as well as the entire bestowing process of the skill. Naturally, the shorter the casting time and bestowing process were, the more efficient the heal would be. As for effectiveness, This obviously referred to the amount of HP recovered from each cast of heal. The stats that affected the skill's efficacy were the character's intelligence followed by endurance, while the stats that affected speed were mainly spirit followed by intelligence. The natural stat growth of priests prioritized endurance. Thus, most priests in Parallel World focused their point allocation on endurance. Not only would doing this increase their HP and improve their survivability, it would also increase the effectiveness of their heal, essentially killing two birds with one stone. Splitting the 5 stat points by putting 4 points to endurance and 1 point to intelligence, 3 points to endurance and 1 point each to intelligence and spirit, or 3 points to endurance and 2 points to intelligence, were how most priests built their characters. Not one of them considered endurance to be the least important stat. In fact, 9 out of 10 priests in Parallel World would allocate their stats in this manner. For many players to use such distributions, it could be assumed that such builds were definitely not wrong and were surely the most essential builds for survival. However, such builds could not bring out the highest efficacy of the priest's heal. Naturally, there were few who discarded endurance to focus on pure intelligence and spirit build. The purpose of these sorts of builds was to fully use the abilities of a priest. To reach such an extreme level, the speed and effectiveness would have to be perfectly balanced, and priests called this pairing that ignored endurance as the golden ratio. From the game's official release until now, priests with golden ratio were only rumored existences. Eventually, it transformed into a sort of joke, as every priest believed that his or her build was the golden ratio. Some priests who did not have a heavy endurance build even called their stat point allocation as the true golden ratio. Plenty of contrasting opinions existed for this, and they were open to endless debates and discussions. Previously, when players of Corrals were forming parties to grind levels, Brave Surge and young Master Han happened to be part of the same party that talked about the golden ratio of priests. All the party members had different opinions regarding this, with some non-priest players expressing their views on the matter. In the end, the taciturn young Master Han chillingly said, "What's there to argue about? Whoever is the best priest will naturally have a build that is closest to this golden ratio." This statement caused Brave Surge to take note of the priest young Master Han, and that was when he realized that the latter was not just an average skilled expert. In terms of skill and awareness, he was top-notch. Brave Surge had never seen a more exceptional priest throughout Parallel World than him. By young Master Han's reasoning, Brave Surge recognized him as the priest closest to having the golden ratio. Just take the incident before him as an example. One heal from young Master Han had saved this warrior's life from Gufei's descending wheel of flames, and the successive heal that followed quickly filled the warrior's HP to full. Out of all the priests Brave Surge knew, only young Master Han could do this. To better illustrate this point, Waterflower had priests as well, and they were also experts. However, not one of them could timely save someone's life from the flame wheel. Even those with fast reaction speed were unable to react accordingly. War Without Wounds fighting spirit surged forth once his HP was filled up, and he sent several players near him flying outward with a swing of his claymore. Some of these players, especially the low HP thieves, that had already taken Gufei's descending wheel of flames, were killed off by his assault. As for those high HP warriors, they were beaten black and blue by War Without Wounds' reinvigorated assault. Brave Surge was not looking at this scene, though. Instead, he was signaling several of the priests with him to assist the others accordingly. Waterflower mercenary group brought in 72 men for this match. Although Gufei's spells and kicks and War Without Wounds' explosive assault killed off 17 of his men, the remaining 55 men were enough to deal with a warrior like War Without Wounds. Nonetheless, what they needed to be on guard against were the untraceable attacks coming from above and from the surrounding area. Chapter 229, The Fallen Young Master Han. Despite the lack of priests to assist them, the warriors of Waterflower Mercenary Group resolutely engaged War Without Wounds in a hot-blooded fight. War Without Wounds, whose back was leaning on a great oak, put up a laudable resistance against the 5 enemies. This fight highlighted War Without Wounds' wise decision to dedicate a hefty portion of his profit from the previous meet and greet into purchasing top-grade equipment. Warriors did not have the ability to launch sneak attacks like thieves, nor did they have the specialty of performing combo attacks like fighters. They would usually find themselves clashing with opponents head-on, pitting their HP with others, and exchanging blows up front, so it was nearly impossible for them to avoid receiving damage. Receiving 800 injuries in exchange for the lives of 1,000 enemies. Superscript 1 was the most apt depiction of a warrior's PvP, especially when it was a fight between warriors. Counterattacking the enemy's every blow was a good move for a warrior in a 1 versus 1 PvP. Meanwhile, the only way for a warrior to last longer in a 1 versus many fight was to possess outstanding defense, as it would allow the warrior to withstand the enemy's attacks as he or she took down as many of them while allowing a comrade priest to aid him or her in time. To be able to hold his own against more than 5 enemies without requiring urgent assistance. This was what War Without Wounds had been thinking while making his equipment purchases. His weapons and the enemies fiercely clashed and separated beneath the oak tree. Brave Surge was not watching this chilling fight as he was busy organizing the mages and archers in his group to begin assaulting the enemies atop the trees. Even the few priests that were idly standing on the sidelines were asked to throw holy ball into the mix. The damage dealt by a priest's holy ball might be minute, but its glow would be more helpful in illuminating the shaded areas between branches and leaves than a mage's fireball. The 5 men of young Master's elite hid motionlessly among the branches and leaves of the trees for fear of being shot senselessly by the enemies. In fact, Royal God Call remained still despite the pain he was feeling after getting struck by an arrow on his butt and could only hatefully remember the culprit for his suffering. Brave Surge and his men were not just shooting blindly. The spell Gufei had previously cast gave Brave Surge an idea of where the others could possibly be hiding. Young Master Hans Heel also ended up pointing out his team's hiding place. After discussing things with 2 priests and pointing to a certain direction, Brave Surge commanded everyone to target the area he had just indicated. Gufei knew that young Master Han could no longer hide himself from the enemy's newly unleashed wave of attacks. Although this first wave of attack did not land too near his hiding spot, given Brave Surge's meticulousness and dedication at locating them, it was only a matter of time before young Master Han would be struck down. Gufei was hiding not too far from young Master Han's location, so the probability of him being in their line of bombardment was high. However, unlike young Master Han, Gufei had the blink skill. Seeing that the enemy's attacks were about to arrive and that his blink skill's cooldown time had ended, Gufei furtively teleported into a relatively safe place. He turned his head over and saw that a wave of attacks was quickly traveling to where young Master Han was. Young Master Han lacked any skill that would let him furtively move to another location. Climbing further up the tree would only reveal his exact position to the enemies, as well. Without any viable method to save his life, young Master Han could only wait for his death. Despite his helpless situation, young Master Han remained calm and collected. He even unhurriedly took out a small bottle of liquor from his dimensional pocket and leisurely drank its content. Just as the attacks were about to hit him, he nonchalantly threw that bottle toward War Without Wounds and the enemy warriors that were wildly exchanging blows without anyone noticing. That bottle struck an enemy warrior's shoulder and loudly shattered into pieces. That guy's back. The bunch of warriors battling with War Without Wounds scattered about as if their butts were on fire. After a bit, the 2 sides looked at one another with stunned eyes. Their group leader Brave Surge felt quite embarrassed by his men's cowardice and chided them. "Didn't I tell you all to not panic and to calmly analyze the situation when something happens? Don't get so flustered if you don't even know what the origin of the sound was." Actually, these men should not be blamed for reacting like this, as they were merely guarding themselves against Gufei's attacks to the point that they became overly sensitive to even the slightest changes in their surroundings after they saw his indomitable fighting prowess. Brave Surge had been keeping his head up this whole time, so he had identified that that thrown object was an empty liquor bottle in the first instance. He commanded his men's attacks to direct their attacks at where the bottle had come from. At this same moment, they saw young Master Han suddenly part the branches, peek his head out, and laugh at them before jumping down toward the crowd. Follow up with a spell was the message that Gufei received from him. However, Brave Surge saw through this particular tactic and he immediately ordered his men who were about to surround young Master Han to stop. "Don't approach him. Archers and mages, prepare to attack when he lands." Young Master Han landed on the ground with a thud, eliciting a wince from him. This was an 8-meter jump, so he received some damage from the fall. When the archers and mages saw young Master Han land, they immediately launched their attacks on him. Young Master Han had anticipated their attacks from the treetop, and he had chosen to land at this particular spot due to this. Without pausing to think, young Master Han rolled to the side and hid himself behind a nearby large tree. This position was a dead angle for Brave Surge and the other ranged job classes. Any skill that required direct view of the target was made useless in the face of a proper cover. Only skills like homing projectile and fireball were able to track their targets once they took cover. Sadly, those were useless against young Master Han as well, as his job class was a priest, and he was someone who had managed to attain the legendary golden ratio at that. Therefore, it was a simple task for him to grasp the timing between their attacks and survive the damage dealt by them through his heal. Quickly move. Brave Surge signaled everyone to change their positions to spots that would allow them to hit the target. He intended for them to shift angle and have young Master Han, who was hiding behind the tree, enter their line of sight, yet even after changing positions, his men's view was still blocked by something else. Truly, the spot young Master Han had chosen was exceptional. Nothing was perfect in this world, though, so an archer eventually found a good position where he could clearly see young Master Han's figure that was leaning against the tree. As he excitedly knocked his bow, he felt a breeze by his waist. Turning his head to look, he was greeted by Sword Demon's permanent scowl before being sent out of the PvP arena. "There's another one over here." Someone discovered Sword Demon's presence and hurriedly unleashed an attack over to him. But with practiced deftness, Sword Demon delved deep into the forest and immediately found a cluster of trees to obstruct the archers and mages' clear view of him. 124, 253, 120, 251, 117, 146. Sword Demon's private message constantly flashed with coordinates from young Master Han. With young Master Han directing him superbly, Sword Demon easily weaved through the forest, looped about, and appeared behind the backs of 3 different archers or mages, and assassinated them. Overall, he had killed 4 players, including that archer from before. Fear ran up Brave Surge's spine and he hurriedly ordered his men back to prevent them from spreading too far out. This convoluted command was another decision that paid attention to one matter while losing sight of another. Sword Demon's ghost-like movement derailed Brave Surge's train of thought. Gathering his men to one spot would just result to them facing a more frightening foe. As the archers and mages gathered around Brave Surge, the ground beneath their feet began to heat up. Oh, no. Those with fast reaction speed tried to flee from the spells. Tears streamed down their faces, but it was too late. The blazing tree of 1,000 Inferno spell rose from the ground and its flames grew in intensity with each passing second. This group of low HP players simply had no way of surviving Goofei's fiery assault. Some mages with high magic defense managed to cling on to their dear lives, but before they could celebrate, descending wheel of flames had finished forming in the sky and descended on their heads. The mages and archers of Waterflower mercenary group were smashed into smithereens after being sandwiched between Goofei's 2 spells. Everything descended into chaos and Brave Surge lost control of his men. Young Master Han even managed to find time to peek his head from behind the tree and bestow heal on War Without Wounds to recover some of his HP. War Without Wounds, who was steadfastly pitting his HP with the other enemy warriors, suddenly perked up. This was not due to young Master Han's heal but due to his Cyclone's cooldown time finally ending. While Cyclone had incredibly high damage output, the skill's cooldown time was appropriately lengthy. Young Master Han's heal boosted War Without Wounds' confidence to a whole new level. Ignoring the attacks of the 5 men, War Without Wounds resolutely took 2 steps forward and unleashed Cyclone with his 2 claymores whirling out. War Without Wounds had high defense and offense, so the 5 warriors felt great remorse well within them as they faced his vicious attacks. They had originally thought that the 5 of them would be able to easily finish off War Without Wounds, yet they had never imagined that everything would drag out until this moment. Had they known that this would happen, the 5 of them would not have come forward together. Just 2 or 3 of them using Cyclone would have cleanly sliced War Without Wounds off the face of the map long ago. They could only blame the fact that Cyclone's cooldown time was simply too long, which caused them, just like most warriors, to prefer saving it for the critical moments. Their frugal mentality had actually caused them to be at a disadvantageous position right now, as it had given War Without Wounds the chance to launch his counterattack. With how long War Without Wounds had been taking their blows, the amount of rage points he had accumulated was plentiful. As such, the dual-wielded cyclone shredded the 5 warriors until they turned into beams of white light. Royal God Call did not idle while he was atop the tree. With Brother Assist's blessing of strength, he picked targets and fired off arrows as if his life depended on it. The people under the trees had already fallen into disarray. They feared Sword Demon, who came and went like an incorporeal apparition, and they were even more fearful of the devastating spells Gufei could release. As for Royal God Call, hardly anyone took note of his shot arrows. "Don't panic!" Brave Surge hollered while anxiously waving his magic staff about. Waterflower mercenary group lost 25 men in the ensuing panic, and they were now down to only 30 men. What was worse was the fact that almost half of these remaining 30 men were priests that pretty much possessed no combat power. Gufei's burst of spells had since calmed down. Sword Demon had hidden himself in a corner of the forest after his sneak attacks. War Without Wounds had finished off the 5 warriors, and the enemy priests had chosen to not clash with him despite holding numerical superiority. As the forest descended into silence once more, Royal God Call finally located the archer that had shot him on the butt previously. "Eat this, you little shit!" Royal God Call gritted his teeth and fired off an arrow on Snipe that he had been saving for this. The arrow screeched through the air and Waterflower lost another player. Only 29 players were left on Waterflower Mercenary Group's side now. Chapter 230. Satisfied amid their dissatisfaction from the moment that Brave Surge and his men had entered the forest, he had been moving within young Master Han's expectations. Using his fellow mercenaries as bait for Gufei to cast AO spells on the enemies. This was but a small part of his entire scheme. While that gambit might work on the enemies for the first person that fell down, Brave Surge would begin to expect for Gufei to cast spells on a bunch of them whenever someone fell down. As a result, he would surely stop any melee job classes from getting near any man that fell down and would choose to have the ranged job classes finish off the target. Instead, it was when Brave Surge had made such a decision that he had thoroughly fallen for young Master Han's scheme. The melee job classes dared not to close in on a target, while the ranged job classes' attacks were severely restricted by the forest's terrain. No matter how many ranged job classes Waterflower Mercenary Group sent, those players' capabilities to fight in this type terrain would certainly be limited. This was the key to young Master Han's current stratagem. Using himself as the bait to provide Gufei a chance to bombard the enemies to death was the real trap here. This ploy caused Brave Surge to make decisions according to young Master Han's expectations. Brave Surge's judgment was not really mistaken. Waterflower would have truly held the advantage in terms of number and would not have lost the match due to such limitations if this had been a conventional fight. Unfortunately for him, Brave Surge and his men were not just facing any average mercenary group today but an elite bunch of men. Each of the 6 men of young Master's elite displayed eagerness to kill that Waterflower struggled to fend them off and was at a loss on what to do. In the end, even Brave Surge lost his cool upon seeing the messy situation that had unfolded due to his erroneous command. A command that provided Gufei an exploitable opportunity. 29 men. They only had 29 men left, and they were mostly made up of priests and knights, too. The players who were in charge of dealing damage now had their dream configuration, wherein each of them could have a personal priest and knight assisting them. This type of treatment was usually reserved for the strongest players in a group. And yet, despite experiencing the treatment reserved for top experts, not one of them could find it in them to smile. The forest grew silent once more. Gufei, Sword Demon, and Royal God Call stopped attacking the enemies simultaneously. Young Master Han was still hiding behind the tree from before. As for Brother Assist, he was up in the tree. Only War Without Wounds and young Master's elite was heroically standing right before the 29 men. War Without Wounds had been standing in front of the enemies ever since he fell from the tree at the start of the skirmish. But for a reason or two, he was never the one leading their group's assault. War Without Wounds cared not for this, though. Today's PvP had allowed him to enjoy his kills sumptuously, and more importantly, He had gotten a rarely acquired tidy amount of kill points. He always had difficulty earning himself contribution points with young master's elites configuration. Gufei, Sword Demon, and Royal God Call could kill plenty of enemies that earned them a lot of contribution points, while young Master Han and Brother Assist could earn contribution points even if they did not participate directly in a fight. As for him, he was only able to kill a limited amount of enemies every match. Sword Demon felt pity for him that he would even give him 5 points for protecting young Master Han and Brother Assist. Such humiliation. It was simply too humiliating for War Without Wounds. He was known as the #1 warrior in many MMOs. Yet he was nothing more than a glorified bodyguard in this mercenary group. War Without Wounds had always been looking for a chance to display his skills, and today had been that fated day. Gufei had fortunately saved him at the start, otherwise, he would have long been sent out of the PvP arena by the surrounding enemies. War Without Wounds shuddered at the thought. If he had been killed off just then, he might not even have earned those 5 contribution points for being a bodyguard. Inadvertently, War Without Wounds disregarded the 29 men before him in his contemplation. Young Master Han leisurely appeared from behind the tree and chuckled softly at Brave Surge's direction. Brave Surge laughed as well, albeit with bitterness. He really had no way of dismissing this loss in today's match like how he had done during that previous guild match. Back then, many coincidental occurrences had caused them to feel dissatisfied at the final outcome. Waterflower had been losing this fight today from start to finish, so they had no way of feeling disgruntled about it. Just as Brave Surge was about to say something, a sudden rustling of leaves sounded from above and the branches and leaves parted to reveal a person that came swooping down to Brave Surge in lightning speed. The players of Waterflower who clearly witnessed the scene exclaimed, "Oh, there's a rope." The Tarzan-like person was none other than Gufei. His hand was holding onto a piece of rope that was tied to a part of a tree. When the enemy players saw this, they quickly added 2 and 2 together. Recalling Gufei's smooth dive from the sky before, they associated the rope to his previous feat. Twin Incineration. Incinerate. Gufei did not swing over for nothing and immediately used his signature move. Having finished replenishing his mana by eating a piece of fruit while atop a tree, he caused a fiery glow resembling a dragon to streak past the heads of the Waterflower's remaining men that were marveling over his suspension trick. 4 unlucky players happened to be in the path of Gufei's swipe and were unceremoniously insta-killed. 25. Waterflower mercenary group only had 25 men left. Gufei was not Tarzan, after all, and he did not train in flying from tree to tree like a monkey. Discovering that he had no place to land upon reaching the highest point of his swing, Gufei decided to obey the laws of physics and used inertia to swing backward. This act pissed off the players of Waterflower. In wuxia novels, sci-fi films, and even the animal kingdom, anyone who utilized such a move would dashingly land himself or herself by a tree on the other side. Who would have thought that Gufei would actually have no idea on how to do that and would cowardly swing back when he found no place to land his feet? This sort of swinging motion that would take forever to end seemed like a mockery to them. The swing was the main prop to project a warm and fuzzy feeling in romantic dramas, yet everyone here was co-starring in an action-packed novel. This was therefore utterly inappropriate. Gufei also realized how inconvenient his backward swing was, so he hurriedly lifted his sword and chanted, "Translocation, blank." The good thing about instant cast spells was that the spellcaster did not need to strike a pose when casting. As long as a mage wished to do so, he or she could cast it whenever he or she liked. At the end of his incantation, Gufei disappeared from the rope. When the players of Waterflower saw that Gufei was no longer idiotically swinging by, they swept their eyes over the surrounding trees to find where he had teleported himself. Suddenly, someone screamed from behind them. Everyone turned to look and saw Gufei currently flourishing his sword toward them from behind. It was not just him, though. They did not know when, but the thief had appeared once more and launched an attack on one of them while they were preoccupied. These 2 men swiftly killed off 2 players of Waterflower before each hastily fled to a big tree for cover. Having committed the whole map to his memory, the talented young Master Han expertly directed them to their current positions that were dead angles for the range job classes. Sadly, The direction Ali challenged Royal God Call could not enjoy young Master Han's superb guidance and could only pitifully fire off arrows from within the tree branches whenever he could. Sword Demon, who had stealth, and Gufei, who had blink, proceeded to take 2 or 3 enemy lives once more after their respective skills' cooldown time ended before disappearing into the surrounding trees once more. Royal God Call continued to shoot arrows from above. Meanwhile, War Without Wounds had been standing idly all by himself when he smugly faked charging toward the swiftly decreasing players of Waterflower. This left the enemies literally on edge of mental breakdown. The only thing they managed to gain from all this was a better grasp of the cooldown time for Gufei's blink. This continued for quite a while. The players of Waterflower could not come up with any good stratagem to counter young Master's elite, so they could only helplessly watch their fellow brothers in arms fall one by one. When only 5 men were left of the opposing group, young Master Han once more revealed himself from behind the tree and asked Brave Surge with a smile, "Are we done here?" Brave Surge sighed before he squeezed out a smile. "I'll see you outside, then." Young Master Han nodded his head. Brave Surge and the remaining 4 players, who were mentally drained from everything that had happened, silently forfeited the match by voluntarily exiting the PvP arena. In the semi-finals of the Mercenary PvP tournament, the 6-man group of young Masters Elite once more achieved a perfect score. To be able to kill to such a degree, not only did the exceptionally bountiful experience points and gold rewards please the 6 men of young Masters Elite, the outcome of the match was also beyond satisfactory to them. Nevertheless, they all appeared calm like still water. After all, Brave Surge would be waiting for them outside of this PvP arena. In the end, they were unable to escape the ensuing pleasantries. Brave Surge was truly intent on lassoing them into the guild and merely stopped short of promising to revere them as if they were his paternal grandfather upon joining the guild. The skills of these experts to act dumb really shone when it came to this point. Royal God Call acted high and mighty, treating the offer with disdain. War Without Wounds acted humble to the point of being disgusting. Brother Assist remained quiet. Aware of his mediocrity when it came to PvP, he knew that Brave Surge and company were only treating him with deference due to the 5 others. Sword Demon honestly told them that he was currently not thinking of joining a guild. Young Master Han did not say a word as he was already a member of Corrals. As for Gufei, after his fellow mercenaries had expressed their opinions, he merely shrugged his shoulders to Brave Surge and company that were hoping to recruit him the most. His look seemed to say, "I am just going with the flow." Brave Surge also knew that forcing them to join would be useless, so he did not insist further. He merely laughed it off and said, "I'll wait for the day when we have a chance to work together in the future. Then, if you meet with any difficulties in your missions, don't hesitate to ask for our help." Mercenary groups were formed to do business. No matter how indifferent young Master Han was, he would never reject such goodwill when offered. Thus, he simply reciprocated the others' laugh and said, "Since we are familiar with one another, we will naturally help one another in times of need." It was quite a unique sight to see people lose a match with such joy. The harmony that permeated before the battle and the general exchange of goodwill after the match. This round of the Mercenary PvP tournament had ended with much amity.